Do you remember that time you worked on an illustration and realized halfway through that it just wasn't what you imagined? Not necessarily bad, just wrong. The idea in your head felt so clear at the start, you could almost see the finished drawing already. But the more you worked on it, the further away it seems to get. Usually what happens next is that you try to fix it. You adjust the sketch, redo the lines, tweak proportions, maybe even change the pose a little. You keep pushing the drawing forward because you already invested time into it. And starting over feels like admitting that something went wrong. I know that feeling very well. But over time, I realized something that completely changed the way I approach drawing. Can you guess what it is? My name is Silvia, I'm a self-taught artist and VTuber from the very known land of pasta. And today, we're finally solving the problem of all those unfinished drawings starting at you from the corner of the room. Because sometimes the hardest part about drawing isn't starting, it's knowing when to stop and begin again. Before panicking, let's take a step back for a moment. Most artists reach a point halfway through a piece where something suddenly feels wrong. Not necessarily that the entire drawing is bad, but sometimes things just feels off. When that happens, it's very easy to panic and think the whole drawing is failing, when in reality, it might just be a small thing throwing everything off. In those cases, you can either try out the trust the process and keep going for a bit longer, or take a break and come back to it later with fresh eyes. It's actually very common for artists to feel uncertain while they're working on a piece, especially in the middle stages where nothing looks finished yet. So don't get too frustrated if your drawing doesn't immediately look the way you imagined it. Taking a small break can help much more than you think. When you come back to the drawing later, your eyes are more rested and it becomes much easier to notice mistakes you might have made along the way. Taking breaks is not only allowed, it's necessary. Your brain does need a bit of a distance to see clearly again. But sometimes, even after that break, the drawing still doesn't feel right. And that's when we reach the scary part. If after all that, the drawing still makes you feel frustrated, there is one thing you might need to do. You just restart it. Yes, I said it. And I know what you're thinking right now. Sulia, are you crazy? I spent hours on this! But here's the important part. Restarting doesn't erase the work you did. The first version was practice. In fact, there is something I like to remind myself in these particular occasions to not feel too bad about it. The first drawing teaches you what the second one needs. I want to share with you a little trick I like to use sometimes to know when to do it. I call it the 10-minute test. If you spend 10 minutes, or more or less, it's really up to you, trying to fix something in the drawing and it still feels wrong, stop. Don't keep digging the hole deeper. Restart the sketch. Those minutes are usually enough to tell you if the problem is small or structural. And if it is structural, restarting will almost always feel faster than trying to repair everything piece by piece. When you restart, you're not guessing anymore. Most of the time, you already know what didn't work. Maybe the pose was stiff, maybe the composition felt empty, maybe the proportions were strange. The second attempt is almost always faster. And very often, better. It's not news that starting over, it's an incredible scary thing, so I thought to help you out. Or at least I'm gonna do the best I can. The big part of it's gonna be you. So one of the things that helps me out the most is taking a step back, going back to the basics. Pick up a pen and sketch with it. Yes! No eraser allowed. Allow yourself to fail to draw that muscle and challenge yourself to start it all over as many times as your hand needs to remember how to draw it without being scared anymore. You will learn from your mistakes more naturally over time and you'll end up less frustrated to start over. Another thing that helps me a lot is thumbnails. Instead of jumping straight into a full illustration, try making tiny sketches first. Think of them as visual brainstorming. You can test poses, composition, and ideas in just a few minutes. And if something doesn't work, you haven't wasted hours. Only a few minutes. And there is something else that's very important to remember. Most artists you follow and admire aren't showing you the messy parts of their process. On social media, you usually see the final polished artworks, not the messy sketches or the failed attempts that came before it. But they exist. Even professional artists restart drawings all the time. Concept artists, illustrators, animators, all of them redraw the same idea multiple times before it works. The goal isn't to protect the first idea. The goal is to find the best one. And every time you pick up your pencil again, even after a restart, that's where the fun of drawing really happens. In the 8 years I've been drawing, I've struggled with this exact problem more times than I can count. And it's a thing that I'm still struggling with, actually. For a long time, I thought the solution was just ignoring the feeling and pushing the drawing until it was finished. But that didn't really work. I ended up with so many illustrations that were technically finished, but I wasn't happy with them. And that left me with the feeling that I wasn't really improving. And honestly, it kind of sucked. Last year, I hit a particular hard wall with this. At one point, I restarted the same illustration 3 different times, and each time it somehow looked worse in my eyes. That was not exactly encouraging, because every time I looked at those drawings, instead of feeling proud of them, I just kept thinking about what I should have done differently. And when you pile up enough of those feelings, it starts making you doubt your own work a little more than you should. But at the same time, I started realizing something important. If a drawing doesn't convince you, that actually is not a bad sign. In fact, that's a really good one. It means your eyes can already see the difference between what you made and what you wanted to make. And that gap right there, that's exactly where improvement happens. And that moment forced me also to rethink my process. I realized I was thinking too much about the final result and not enough about enjoying the act of drawing itself. So I went back to my old sketchbooks, and looking through them all was surprisingly comforting because I noticed something interesting. Even years ago, I was restarting drawings all the time, and somehow that's exactly how I improved. Restarting wasn't the problem. It was part of the process all along. Restarting a drawing doesn't mean the first attempt was useless. It just means it was part of refining the idea. Most creative work involves multiple versions, and drawing is no different. Sometimes the first version is just a step forward towards the one that actually works, and letting go of that first attempt can make the next one much stronger. Learning to restart without hesitation doesn't make drawing easier, but it does make improvement more consistent. Because the goal isn't to save every drawing, the goal is to make better ones. So tell me, do you think restarting your drawing will feel a little less scary now? Let me know in the comments down below. And if there is something in art you're struggling with right now, feel free to write it in there as well. It might become the topic of the next video. If you like this one, remember to leave a like, and if you want to see more tutorials and art videos in the future, why not subscribe? Hope to see you very soon. Bye! Sono stata brava, eh? Deve fa!